If you feel stuck with your art, no matter how much time you invest, how hard you try, or how much you draw, just give me the next 15 minutes and let me explain to you how you can improve your art today and make some crazy fast improvements in very little time. This method works for all mediums and subjects, no matter if you are a traditional or a digital artist, because it is based on a learnable skill rather than on a set of tools. Just a little disclaimer, my favorite medium for now is gouache. That's why I will demonstrate this method with this traditional painting style, but it still works for every medium. You do not need anything that I will show or use in this demonstration except the knowledge and the wisdom I'm about to share with you. So without further ado, let's get started. And as with every painting, you should always start your art not with a sketch, but with a reference. At least if you are working on your painting skills and want to improve faster. There is no shame in wanting to paint only for the sake of it, but today we want to learn something, so we need a good reference. And if you want this method to work, you should not search for a random picture on Pinterest that you think looks aesthetic, but visit some of your favorite artists' content. You're basically searching for someone whose art style you gravitate towards. I choose this picture from Kelly Vivian Art not only because I love the cohesive color palette in her artwork and her sheer amount of experience in gouache, but because she is a master in simplifying complicated landscapes into easy shapes and colors, which makes it easier to recreate and learn from her examples. So, it's time for our next step. Still, this is not about sketching at all, but the backbone of this whole method. I call it effective deconstruction, which is only a fancy way of saying that an art piece consists of many different aspects that combined form a beautiful picture. Just the way that a cake is made of a lot of different ingredients, and artwork is never just paint on a canvas. Of course, there are a million ways to bake a cake and endless flavors to explore. But if you would simplify nearly every cake recipe, it will come down to these main ingredients. Most of us already knew that. Yet we can sometimes forget how simple the underlying foundation of a truly delicious cake is. And without a recipe or an ingredient list, it would be very hard to reproduce the exact cake only by taste. So I will tell you some of the main ingredients in every good painting, which are, in my opinion, cohesive colors, composition, and contrast. Among other things, of course. I don't say that there are not other and different things out there that will enhance your art. We all know that a cake without icing looks a little dull. It just tastes and looks better with additional toppings and flavors. But we are not here to perfect your sprinkles on top, but to learn the basics of baking and reproducing the things other pro artists already mastered. We are here to learn why your cake always ends up salty when it should be sweet. And to do that, we have to look at the fundamentals. Starting with our first big C and main ingredient, cohesive colors. Every color comes in 1,000 different hues. So do a lot of paintings. It's what makes art so interesting to look at. The thousands of color possibilities we have for every painting can feel so exciting, even paralyzing at times. Good color choices are what ties all other aspects in a painting neatly together and helps the viewer to understand what you are trying to communicate in your piece. That's why your colors should not be a decision by accident and cannot be neglected. Color choice can take the same sketch and transform it in so many different paintings with so many different moods. And what every color palette has in common is a good distribution between harmonious and contrasting color. There are thousands of ways to tackle this balance between harmonious and contrasting color in the face of color theory that this topic alone deserves its own video. But for the beginning, we only need to understand this. You can break down and simplify nearly all cohesive color palettes to the 3 to 5 main colors. Which does not mean that you are not allowed to use more than 3 to 5 colors in a piece to make it look cohesive, but that we do not want to get overwhelmed with the color choice of our art idols, who are pros at what they are doing and choose perfect colors rather subconsciously because it is as easy as breathing to them. We just want to learn that as well. So do not go ahead and pre-mix every little color that you see in your reference painting, just as well as you shouldn't copy every element blindly. But instead, choose your 3 to 5 most important colors, lay them down on your mixing palette, and go from there. We don't go for perfect accuracy or a neat copy of the reference, but we want to nail down the mood of the painting in our own style. If you struggle to identify the main colors in your drawing, squint your eyes so that all sharp edges and lines blurry into each other. This might help to identify the few colors you are actually searching for. Generally, this concept would apply to a lot of paintings and design principles. There are even rules in graphic design that set a perfect ratio for a 3-part color palette to maximize visual interest around 60, 30 and 10%. This is not as important for us because we are not yet creating our own pieces and color palettes, but rather analyzing things that already work. But it helps to understand why a lot of paintings might follow this rule. Not adding a lot of hue variety, but sticking with a very clean and minimalistic color palette is a stylistic choice. But all artists need a little contrast in their palette to enhance the next big C of every painting: composition. This would, in our cake example, be finding the right ratio of all ingredients. Because as all ingredients are essential and add to the perfect taste of the cake, the ratio they have to one another is just as important. If you add too much of the unimportant stuff, like salt, your cake will turn out tasting funny. And if you do not add enough of the important stuff, like sugar, your cake may end up tasteless. The same applies to your art. This ratio from unimportant to important stuff is our composition, and should not happen on accident. While there are a lot of different proven ways to effectively composition your art, you don't need to know any of them if you understand the following principle. Because even though composition is sometimes interwoven with the other elements of the drawing, the difference between a piece with and without composition is very noticeable. Because good composition makes your art easier to read and understand, and therefore more enjoyable and accessible for everyone. If not all elements in a painting have its place, space and size, it's very hard to understand which part of the drawing is meant to be the focal point, which is really what all composition is about. No matter what shape or color palette you choose, it should all just enhance the focal point of your painting. As long as it does this, you are doing fine. And for everyone who thinks, okay, I guess, but what the hell are you talking about? What even is a focal point? Well, good question. If you ask Google, it would say that in general, a focal point in your painting is one element or a group of elements that attracts the eye on the first glimpse. It stands out and should therefore be our main focus while painting. It is also known as eyecatcher and should be the highlight or main event of your drawing. But I think it's way more than that. I would argue that your focal point is the very start of every painting, the very idea you have. Let's say you wanted to draw your Princess OC in the woods. Your own character is the main idea and will most likely be the focus of the painting, with details to her face, clothes and jewelry. Not because she has to be, but because you thought about her first. In contrast to this, you could also say, today I want to draw a bright, magical forest, with someone walking through it. Here it is very obvious which of the elements has more importance to the painting. And even though both of these paintings could have the same elements to it, the result should drastically differ. Typically, with original characters, they are the focal point, and we just add sometimes even a random scenery around them to make the art piece feel whole. But we never want to take the attention away from them. Yet, exactly this happens when there was not enough thought put into the composition beforehand. Because even though the focal point should get the most attention while painting, we also have to make an intentional effort while mapping out a painting to make sure it stands out, which could be achieved in a lot of ways, including contrast, which we will talk about in a few minutes, and with colors, which we already talked about. But what if I have more focal points in my drawing? You might think, from what I previously told you, that there should only be one focal point. But sometimes a painting ends up with more than one. In this piece, for example, we have 3 focal points that create the center of attention for the painting. First, we have the 2 snowy trees in the midground. Second, the sun with its red beam around it. And third, the sparkling snow in the foreground. They are forming a triangle where our eyes naturally follow its direction in this exact order. To reproduce this effect, when having so many different elements of interest, you should determine which is the most important eye catcher and which is the last, so that you can then distribute the visual weight accordingly. Otherwise, you may be throwing the balance off, resulting in confusing your viewers what to notice first. But let me be clear, this is not the order in which you draw your paintings. If anything, it's the opposite. You always want to start your painting by color blocking the most important colors into place, and once everything is settled, start refining area by area. As a rule of thumb, you usually start with the background and slowly work your way forward, and in the end define your eye catchers. Generally, it's oftentimes easier to create depth in your layers through contrast in your foreground, middle ground and background to make them stand out more from one another. That's what makes this artwork so easy to read, even though about 60% of the canvas is painted in a cool blue. That's also why the secondary color and the accent color are 2 very warm yellow and red tones. It's to create the most visual contrast possible and enhance the focal points. The same goes for our 2 focal trees. Just a little bit of bright paint on a dark blue tree creates enough visual interest for them to really pop off the canvas. This is the beauty of contrast, our last big C. We nearly forget that we are looking at just a flat piece of paper, because it isn't anymore. Contrast and depth really go hand in hand, because it is hard to let elements in your drawing stand out if everything just flows together. Generally, the most contrast possible is between black and white. Still, I did not use pure black for the tree shapes, but rather a dark blue. And even the snow is not 100% white, but a very light blue. While analyzing a reference painting, you will see that nearly no artist uses pure black or white, even if the reference color looks black or white. Using these colors will make your drawing look dull and uninteresting, because nothing is ever just black. There is usually an undertone hidden. While finishing your piece, you want to check your proportions and fix elements that don't follow the composition or color choices you made beforehand. For example, I was so in the zone while painting that only when I started to finish my piece, I realized that I moved the tree line a little bit down while painting, which made the triangle shape of the 3 focal points less effective. So I fixed it with a few fast brush strokes. But so you know, it is not so bad if you see a mistake by the end that is not fixable. After all, we are not here to photocopy our reference, but to better understand easy concepts pro artists use that make their art so beautiful. It's about the fun while painting and the things we learn and progress about, so that we keep creating more beautiful paintings with every try and with less struggles, and there's truly nothing better than that. When you use this guide to deconstruct, analyze and understand the 3 big C's of a pro artist's painting all by yourself, you will see that improving will start to feel effortless. But honestly, everything I just taught you isn't really going to improve your art in the long run if you don't get to establish a consistent art habit or struggle with art block and the absence of inspiration all the time. If you know what I'm talking about, make sure to watch my videos on exactly these topics right here and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss my next videos. Thank you for watching and listening, and until next time, keep drawing.